All right, welcome back. Today we're going to start on the subject of the antisocial personality. Now, yesterday we covered briefly the dynamics, and I think we're going to go back to that a bit later and cover it in more detail with more examples. I wasn't advocating shooting people, by the way, and that example of a guy committing suicide and how that's survival computation, well, of course, I didn't point out that that's also irrational. But so it wasn't a question of whether it's right or wrong. It's just that man does funny things when he's irrational, but he's still trying to survive, and that was the point there. Now, today I'm going to be reading from a booklet called The Cause of Suppression. This is based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard, and this is all about the antisocial personality, who has 12 characteristics, and I think we'll probably get to about the first one today because I'm going to start by reading this introduction here, all right? The antisocial personality. There are certain characteristics and mental attitudes which cause about 20% of a race to oppose violently any betterment activity or group. Such people are known to have antisocial tendencies. When the legal or political structure of a country becomes such as to favor such personalities in position of trust, then all the civilizing organizations of the country become suppressed, and a barbarism of criminality and economic duress ensues. Crime and criminal acts are perpetrated by antisocial personalities. Thus, in the fields of government, police activities, and mental health, to name a few, we see that it is important to be able to detect and isolate this personality type so as to protect society and individuals from the destructive consequences attendant upon letting such have free rein to injure others. As they only comprise 20% of the population, and as only 2.5% are truly dangerous, we see that with a very small amount of effort, we could considerably better the state of society. You might say that's the point of this video series. When we trace the cause of a failing business, we will inevitably discover somewhere in its ranks the antisocial personality at work. In families which are breaking up, we commonly trace one or the other of the persons involved to have such a personality. When life has become rough and is failing, a careful review of the area by a trained observer will detect one or more such personalities at work. As there are 80% of us trying to get along and only 20% trying to prevent us, our lives would be much easier to live were we well informed as to the exact manifestations of such a personality. Thus we could detect it and save ourselves much failure and heartbreak. It is important then to examine and list the attributes of the antisocial personality. Influencing as it does the daily lives of so many, it well behooves decent people to become better informed on this subject. All right. Now, the first characteristic. 1. He or she speaks only in very broad generalities. Quote, they say. Quote, everybody thinks. Quote, everybody knows. And such expressions are in continual use, particularly when imparting rumor. Now, that's the first characteristic. He or she speaks only in very broad generalities. Now, I find very fun and practical exercises for observing these characteristics, all of them that we will eventually get to over the next couple of videos. The exercise is to watch the TV news. It doesn't matter what network, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, or radio news commentator shows. Listen to these shows, and you will start to detect in either the journalist, or more commonly, the interviewee, or in the case of talk shows, people who call in. You will start to notice that there's always a certain percent. And very often it's a high percent because these people have nothing else to do, so they call into radio shows, you see. And listen to them speak and listen for these broad generalities, these sweeping data that are put forth as if they're law. They're not based on anything. There's no reference given as to where the information comes from. Sometimes they say, quote unquote, surveys say, or polls say. They don't say what poll. And of course, there's so many polls out there these days. Who's to know which ones are actually unbiased anymore? Because there's so many activist groups out there polling to come up with information to impart what they want you to hear about. And in fact, news organizations these days are manufacturing news out of polls. And by the way, as regards news organizations, how many times have you heard this? Unnamed sources in the Pentagon. Well, that's interesting. Unnamed sources. There's another generality. You see, a source of information that's unidentified. A person who doesn't want to be identified gives out information. You know, we used to call this rumor, and now they're reporting it as news. Now, why would they do that? Why would a news organization impart rumor? Well, let's not forget, and this will become more evident as we go along, these antisocials work themselves into positions of power. The media is one place where basically command the communication lines of the world. What better place to sort of get out your propaganda, you know? Now, I'm not saying all journalists are antisocials, that wasn't the point. But the point was that this is an area rife with this type of personality. People would be attracted to positions where they were able to control what you hear. So they can forward their ideological propaganda one way or another. Okay, so there's the first characteristic. He or she speaks only in very broad generalities. Now, all right, that was an example of news organizations and listening to radio shows and watching interviews on TV. What about the local schoolyard bully? Let's say you're still in school. All right, there's still antisocials there, and surely you know a bully. All right, or anybody you think might fall into this category, listen for this. They only speak in very broad generalities. Now, I must caution you on one thing here. I'm going to be reading the 12 characteristics. We've just covered the first one. It doesn't mean that if you ever hear anybody say something completely generalized that they're antisocial. We all do it, you know. No, that's not the point. The point is, once we get through all 12 of these characteristics, you will find that the true antisocial personality manifests all or most of these things, all or most of the time. That's the person you want to identify and weed out of your life, all right? Okay, I think that's all we have time for on my YouTube upload for today. There are 11 more characteristics, and in the next video we'll probably cover several more, all right? So, see you then.